Hey everyone, I wanted to come on here today really quick and I wanted to talk to you about one of the most important things when it comes to writing a book or telling a story in general. So that is going to be story versus plot. So let's get started. So let's go ahead and start talking about why it's kind of not really fully understood the difference between story and plot. So one of the things that really kind of frustrated me as a writer was I went to school for journalism and I took a bunch of creative writing classes, nonfiction, fiction, so on and so forth, but yet never once learned story versus plot. So it took me until I was outside of school doing my own research and learning by myself what the difference was between these two. Also, anytime I took these classes or read books or watched other people on YouTube, things like that, they would always say story and plot. And I'd be like, yeah, sure, great. But I never really fully understood the difference between them. So let's go ahead and get started and dive into these really quick. So first off, let's start with story. So story is going to be the internal struggle or the internal changes that the character or MC, the main character, is going to go through over the course of the story. So when you think about that, you kind of think of the change that they go through throughout the whole book, if not through the whole trilogy, series, whatever you have going on there. This is going to be their internal motivation, internal conflicts, anything that's going on inside of them. Story is going to be the thing that pushes the reader to go from scene to scene and read on further and further. So things can happen, which is the plot, which we'll talk about in a second. Things can happen, but why do we want to read about it? Why do we want to keep going? Why keep going? You have to be connected to the main character, the MC. You have to kind of be connected to that. And how we get connected to that is going to be through the internal struggle, the internal emotions, and the conflict that this character has within themselves. I've heard this internal conflict or internal way of building the scenes said a couple different ways. One of my favorite ways to do it is the if, then, therefore way. So if X happens, then Y happens, therefore Z happens. And that's done also on an internal level. So if the character thinks this way, then this will happen. Therefore, the character makes this choice or the character does this. So you kind of have to think of it that way. Another way that I've heard it said is goal, conflict, disaster. So basically, the character at the beginning of the scene has a goal. This also goes throughout the whole story, so you can do it on a broad level as well. But at the beginning, the character has a goal. In the middle, there's a conflict that has to make that character make a decision. And then at the back end of it, there's they made that decision and they kind of go through it. And then there's disaster. It doesn't go the way that they planned. So they have to regroup, and that leads into the next scene. Now, one of the biggest things about why story to me is more important is because I have read crappy plotted books, like just the worst plots you've ever heard, or like the circumstances they put themselves in were like, are you freaking kidding me? But I kept reading because I already knew what the internal conflict on the main character was, and thus I was actually interested in to see how that main character gets through this. With that being said, I've also read books with very shitty main characters that I hated, and if they were real people, I would never speak to them and avoid them at all costs, but I still read the book because, again, I knew their internal struggle, I knew the internal conflict, and you still kind of want to just figure out if they are smart enough to get through this or if they're just going to keep being stupid. Now, if you'd like to read a book to help you develop and figure out story a little bit more deeper, I highly, highly, highly suggest reading Story Genius by Lisa Cron. I hope I'm saying her last name correctly. But that book really helped me to understand how my main character, should be developed and how I should get into her internally, and that would make her choices, throughout the whole book. That, knowing the story, has actually made plotting my story so much easier. And then it has also made me know what was going to happen and where we were going to go, because then I knew what the goal for the character was and if the character was going to get that goal or not. Next, we're going to move on to plot. So plot is all about what happens in the story, the events, the external part of the story. So in Harry Potter, it's going to be he got a letter from Hogwarts saying that he's, accepted. It's something external that happens and he has no control of it, kind of a thing. We also have stories like with Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games, where her sister's name was chosen out of the Big Fish Bowl and she volunteered as tribute. That's her kind of internal part, is that she was like, that's my sister, I've got to go in for her. But the name being pulled out of the bowl was the external. Now, with that being said, without the story, the plot falls flat, doesn't hit right. Nobody's going to want to read it. You know, we can be like, oh, this is, you know, it's going to be a sci-fi, so it's going to have all the things I like in it. But if I don't like the main characters because the story part of it is missing, I'm just going to be like, all right, yeah, stuff's happening. And I've read several books like that, where it's all these events happen, but, you know, I don't care because the main character doesn't care and it's just kind of like going through the motions. Now, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to piss off a lot of people by saying this, but that's kind of how I felt with 50 Shades of Grey. I only read to chapter 4 on the first book, and I know everybody's gonna be like, you should have read further. No, I couldn't get connected to the main character. I was just like, she's a dish rag who has no internal thoughts, no internal drive, and is just kind of going along for the ride, literally and figuratively. But I couldn't get into that. So that's why the story didn't mean anything to me. So like I said, chapter 4, I closed the book and I haven't opened it since. I don't even know if I have it anymore. Now, once you have your story in place and you know who your main character is, you know their goals, you know their internal conflict, all of these things, then you can go ahead and get into plot. Now, plot is going to be the events that happen. One of the best books ever, and I'm pretty sure pretty much every writer will tell you this is a great book to help you know kind of what to hit when it comes to the events that happen, is going to be Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. Hope I'm saying that one right. This is one of the all-time favorite books from most writers. Now, I've heard everybody, when I first started really diving into researching, you know, how the process of writing and how to become a better writer, everybody told me to read Save the Cat. And I did, and I loved it. It was great. But then I literally wrote my first book just using Save the Cat. And I kept going, why do my characters fall flat? Why are they not hitting the way I want them to hit? Why is this not as deep as I want it to be? It just felt shallow. So that's why when I was digging into my research and I was really starting to get into it and somebody, you know, suggested Story Genius and I read it, I was like, that is what I am missing. I'm missing the big story part of it. So yes, read Save the Cat, but first read Story Genius because I feel like that's the order they should be in. And that's going to be a good way to get you to really make these rich stories that are deeper. Now, to wrap this video up, which one is more important, story or plot? Now, if you don't know which one I'm going to say, you probably weren't listening through this whole video. So to me, story is more important because it is that internal conflict and internal goal of the main character. So this being said, humans connect to things that are very human-like, which would be internal conflict, internal goal. Every human has their goals and their conflicts in their life. So they're going to connect to these main characters that have those same things. With that being said, they both are extremely important, obviously, when it comes to writing a story. Once you have your story and you understand what your story is, the plot points that go throughout your book or your story or whatever you want to call it, the plot points become so much easier to come up with, to create, and to change around and make them interesting and things like that. The plot is easy when you have a story. Now, if you feel like you're struggling coming up with a plot while you're writing or outlining, then it's probably your story is missing something. So you need to go back and you need to take a look at your main character, what drives them, what choices they make, what conflicts they have, their worldview on things, what is their misperception of the world, things like that. So if this video helped you, which I really hope it did, go out there, start working on your pieces, go work on your WIPs, go ahead and like, subscribe, and don't forget to click the links down below. Check out more of our information so you can get your story out there to the world.